The boy who knew too much. Billy Butterfield claimed his goldfish, Finney, was actually a highly trained Navy SEAL in disguise. He told anyone who would listen, Lily Rodriguez, the lunch lady, even Mr. Henderson watering the petunias outside the school. Finney, he insisted, had miniature scuba gear hidden in the treasure chest at the bottom of his bowl and conducted nightly reconnaissance missions in the bathroom sink. Mrs. Periwinkle, however, was not a believer. She surveyed the class from behind her oversized spectacles, her lips pursed into a permanent frown line. "Billy," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut through butter, "goldfish do not possess the cognitive capacity to operate sophisticated underwater equipment. They eat flakes and swim in circles." End of story. Billy slumped in his chair, his cheeks burning. He thought he'd been so careful, only revealing Finney's secret identity to trustworthy individuals. Mrs. Periwinkle, unfortunately, trusted only textbooks and the Dewey Decimal System. He glanced at Lily, who offered him a small, sympathetic smile. She knew he sometimes embellished, but she also knew he wasn't malicious. He just saw the world in a slightly different, more exciting light. "But Mrs. Periwinkle," Billy mumbled, "Finney told me." "Finney told you?" Mrs. Periwinkle's eyebrows shot up so high they nearly disappeared into her hairline. "Billy, are you suggesting that your pet is also fluent in English? Perhaps he's writing a memoir?" The class snickered. Even Lily's smile faltered. Billy felt his face flush hotter. He hated being the class clown, but somehow he always ended up there. He fiddled with the edge of his social studies worksheet, a diagram of the Oregon Trail, a subject he found particularly dull. He much preferred imagining Finney dodging rogue rubber duckies in the bathwater. Mrs. Periwinkle clapped her hands together, the sound echoing through the room like a thunderclap. "All right, settle down, everyone. Let's get back to the realities of westward expansion. Now, can anyone tell me what the primary cause of death was for pioneers on the Oregon Trail?" The class dutifully recited the answer: dysentery. Billy, however, imagined Finney, disguised as a pioneer's tooth, bravely battling the dysentery bacteria with his miniature seal-issued trident. The rest of the day crawled by. Mrs. Periwinkle droned on about long division and the proper use of semicolons. Billy doodled pictures of Finney in his notebook, giving him a tiny flak jacket and a determined scowl. He knew, deep down, that Mrs. Periwinkle wouldn't believe him even if Finney himself swam into the classroom and recited the Gettysburg Address. The bell finally rang, releasing the students into the chaotic freedom of after school. Billy gathered his things slowly, dreading the walk home. His mom always asked about school, and he hated lying, but he also hated admitting that Mrs. Periwinkle had once again dismissed his imagination as foolish. As he reached the door, Mrs. Periwinkle called out, "Billy, a word, please." He turned around, his stomach sinking. He knew what was coming. A lecture on the importance of veracity, a stern warning about the dangers of fabrication, and possibly extra homework. Mrs. Periwinkle adjusted her glasses. "Next week is Share Your Family Day," she said, her voice devoid of any warmth. "I expect you to prepare a presentation. And Billy," she added, her gaze unwavering, "I expect it to be factual. Understand?" Billy nodded, feeling a surge of panic. "Yes, Mrs. Periwinkle. Share Family Day." He'd almost forgotten. His dad. Well, his dad presented a significant problem. How could he possibly make his dad sound normal? Factual. He walked home, kicking a loose pebble down the sidewalk. He couldn't tell Mrs. Periwinkle about his dad. Not the real story. She'd never believe it. She'd probably call a social worker. Lily caught up with him halfway down the block. "Hey, Billy," she said, falling in a step beside him. "Don't let Mrs. Periwinkle get you down. She's just strict." "Yeah, well, she's going to be even stricter when she hears about my family," Billy said glumly. Lily tilted her head. "What do you mean? What's wrong with your family?" Billy sighed. "Nothing's wrong exactly. It's just complicated." He stopped walking and looked at Lily. "You know how I told you my dad works in the film industry?" Lily nodded. "Yeah, well," Billy said, taking a deep breath, "he's an actor. A very famous actor." Lily's eyes widened slightly. "Oh, that's cool. Who is he?" Billy hesitated. He knew this was the point of no return. Once he said the name, Lily would either believe him or think he was completely crazy. He closed his eyes for a moment, then blurted out, "He's Jason Statham. Share your family, or so I thought." "All right, class, settle down, settle down," Mrs. Periwinkle chirped, adjusting her spectacles which were perched precariously on her nose. "Today is Share Your Family Day. I'm so excited to hear about your wonderful families and their histories. Billy Butterfield, why don't you start us off? You seem particularly eager this morning." Billy straightened in his chair, a nervous energy radiating from him. He cleared his throat, a practiced maneuver that usually preceded some grand pronouncement. "Okay, so my dad." He paused for dramatic effect, eyes sweeping across the room, landing momentarily on Lily Rodriguez, who offered a small, encouraging smile. "Is Jason Statham." A collective gasp rippled through the classroom, quickly followed by murmurs of disbelief and excited whispers. Mrs. Periwinkle's perfectly painted lips tightened into a thin line. "Jason Statham, the actor?" she asked, her voice laced with thinly veiled skepticism. "The one and only," Billy declared, puffing out his chest. He launched into his tale, arms flailing for emphasis. "He does all his own stunts, you know? Like for real. He told me once, when we were, practicing martial arts in our, backyard dojo." He paused, adding a sound effect. "Hiya," he said. "Billy, son, never let anyone else do your dirty work." A few of the younger students were clearly buying it, their eyes wide with awe. Even some of the older kids, usually immune to Billy's tall tales, seemed intrigued. Lily, however, remained impassive, a small crease forming between her eyebrows. "And he drives like the coolest cars," Billy continued, his voice gaining momentum. "He's got this Aston Martin, all black, with bulletproof windows. He showed me how to drift around corners, squealing the tires screech. And he always says, 'Billy, always be ready for a high-speed chase. You never know when you'll need to escape the bad guys.'" He was on a roll now, embellishing every detail, fueled by the rapt attention of his audience. He described elaborate fight scenes he supposedly witnessed on set, secret training sessions involving underwater escapes and exploding helicopters, kaboom, and even a daring rescue mission where his dad saved a kitten from a burning building. Mrs. Periwinkle held up a hand, silencing him mid-sentence. "Billy," she said, her voice sharp, "that's enough. While I appreciate your enthusiasm, this is Share Your Family, not share your wildest fantasies. We're focusing on verifiable facts, understand?" Billy's face fell. The air seemed to deflate around him, his earlier bravado replaced by a familiar sense of dejection. He mumbled, "But it's true, sort of." Mrs. Periwinkle ignored him, turning to the next student. "Sarah, why don't you tell us about your family's history?" As Sarah began recounting her grandmother's immigration story, Billy sank back into his chair, feeling a familiar sting of humiliation. He hated these Share Your Family days. They always highlighted how ordinary his life was compared to the lives of others. Lily leaned over, whispering, "Hey, Billy, that was quite a story." He shrugged, avoiding her gaze. I know. She doesn't believe me." "Well," Lily said, considering her words carefully, "I want to believe you, Billy. You know I do. But do you have any proof? Like a picture of you with Jason Statham? Or an autograph? Anything?" Billy's heart leaped with a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he could convince her. He rummaged through his backpack, a frantic energy returning to him. I think I might have something." He gave me this. "Hold on." He pulled out a crumpled piece of paper, unfolded it, and presented it to Lily with a triumphant grin. It was a blurry photocopy of a movie poster featuring Jason Statham in a menacing pose. Billy pointed to a barely visible figure in the background. "See? That's me. He let me be an extra in one of his movies." Lily squinted at the poster, her expression unreadable. After a long, silent moment, she looked up at Billy, her eyes filled with a mixture of sympathy and something else. "Billy," she said softly, "that's a cutout of your head pasted onto a blurry photo." Billy's shoulders slumped. He knew it was a long shot, but he'd hoped, just for a moment, that Lily would believe him. He stuffed the poster back into his backpack, the weight of his embellished reality settling heavily upon him. The bell signaling the end of class couldn't come soon enough. The teacher's doubt. Mrs. Periwinkle's spectacles perched precariously on her nose, classroom fluorescence reflecting in stark squares on the lenses. Jason Statham, Billy? Really? The honeyed cadence she usually reserved for reading aloud now dripped with a sugary skepticism that sent a wave of nausea through Billy. He'd been so eager, brimming with pride. He'd recounted his dad's daring rescue of Mrs. Higgins' pug from the construction site, the effortless climb up the scaffolding, the sun's blaze on his chrome dome. He'd woven a compelling narrative, perhaps with a flourish or two, but grounded in truth. His dad resembled Jason Statham. A lot. A titter rippled through the room. Emily Carter choked back a laugh, her hand a frantic shield. Even the quiet ones, usually lost in their textbooks, exchanged knowing smirks. Lily Rodriguez, seated beside him, offered a fragile, sympathetic smile, though uncertainty clouded her eyes. "Billy, you sure? I mean," she hesitated, searching for a gentler way to express her doubt. Mrs. Periwinkle's clap echoed, shattering the rising mirth. "All right, everyone settle. While I commend Billy's vivid imagination, let's prioritize factual accuracy, shall we?" Her professionally tight smile failed to reach her eyes, and the air hung heavy with Billy's humiliation. Heat flared in his cheeks, a crimson tide rising. He wanted to vanish, to burrow beneath the linoleum. Yet, something firm took root within him, stubborn defiance. This wasn't just about a story, it was about defending his dad. "He is," Billy burst out, his voice cracking, a blend of indignation and chagrin. "He is. He doesn't advertise it. But he is." "Billy," Mrs. Periwinkle's tone dripped with condescending patience. "Jason Statham is an internationally known actor. Surely, we'd be aware if he were employed in construction." The renewed laughter cascaded over him. Billy's fist clenched, knuckles bone-white. Tears stung his eyelids, but he refused to yield to them. "He doesn't work construction," he yelled, his voice trembling now. "He just helped Mrs. Higgins, and he wants to live a normal life." Mrs. Periwinkle sighed, the sound drawn out and world-weary, suggesting Billy's deliberate recalcitrance. "Billy, I appreciate your creativity, but perhaps we should turn our attention to spelling. Everyone, page 32. He felt utterly crushed, the world tilting. The room swam, a sea of jeering faces. He wanted to scream, to shake them and force them to understand. His dad wasn't a whimsical fantasy. He was tangible. He was indomitable. He was Jason Statham-esque. Close enough. He slumped, the textbook leaden in his grasp. The words danced, meaningless hieroglyphs. The laughter ebbed, replaced by the scratching of pencils and the whisper of paper, but the shame lingered, a vile aftertaste. He risked a glance at Lily, now absorbed in copying spelling words, her brow furrowed in concentration. She avoided his gaze. The bell's shrill chime offered a slender reprieve, but couldn't erase the sting of Mrs. Periwinkle's disbelief or the chorus of mockery. While the other children surged toward the door, a chaotic exodus, Billy remained glued to his seat, head bowed, a lonely island of disgrace amidst the departing throng. A novel wave of resentment washed over him, sharp and scalding. He'd prove them all wrong. He would make them believe. Sketching fury. Billy's face burned. He felt like every eye in Mrs. Periwinkle's overly bright classroom was glued to him. The snickers, thankfully, had subsided, but the silence that replaced them was somehow worse, a heavy, suffocating blanket woven with pity and disbelief. He mumbled a weak, "Yes, Mrs. Periwinkle," and practically scurried back to his desk. He usually loved art, loved the way a blank page could morph into anything he imagined. But now, the sketchbook felt like a lead weight in his lap. He flipped it open anyway, grabbing his charcoal pencil with a grip so tight his knuckles ached. Forget the assignment, forget perspective and shading. He needed to exorcise the humiliation churning inside him. The first strokes were frantic, jagged lines that clawed across the pristine white paper. They formed a crude, distorted face, all sharp angles and furious brows. It wasn't supposed to be Mrs. Periwinkle, but the caricature somehow ended up bearing an uncanny resemblance to her. The thin, pinched mouth, the beady eyes magnified by her spectacles, the severe bun perched atop her head like a precarious bird's nest. It was all there, exaggerated and cruel. He shaded the face with brutal force, grinding the charcoal into the page until his fingers were smudged black. The air around him seemed thick with the dust, a visible manifestation of his frustration. He added wrinkles, deepening the lines around the mouth, etching in every perceived flaw until the drawing was a grotesque exaggeration of his teacher's features. Lily Rodriguez, sitting beside him, nudged his arm gently. "Billy," she whispered, her brow furrowed with concern. "Are you okay?" He didn't look up. "Fine," he muttered, his voice tight and strained. "You don't seem fine." Her voice was soft, hesitant. Mrs. Periwinkle, she could be like that sometimes. He pressed harder on the charcoal, ignoring her. He knew Lily was trying to be nice, but he didn't want her pity. He didn't want anyone's pity. He just wanted to disappear. He wanted to rewind time, to unsay those words, to erase the smug look on Mrs. Periwinkle's face. Lily sighed softly and turned back to her own work. He could feel her gaze on him occasionally, a silent question mark hanging in the air. He pretended not to notice. The rest of the school day was a blur of muted sounds and stifled emotions. The vibrant colors of the posters in the hallway seemed dull, the cheerful chatter of his classmates grating. He ate lunch in silence, pushing the tasteless cafeteria food around his tray. Even his best friend, Tom, noticed something was wrong. Tom tried to joke with him, to coax a smile, but Billy just shrugged him off, claiming he had a headache. In math class, he stared blankly at the whiteboard, the equations swimming before his eyes. He couldn't focus, his mind replaying the scene in art class over and over again. The sting of Mrs. Periwinkle's words echoed in his ears. After school, he usually walked home with Tom, but today he made an excuse, claiming he had to go to the library. He just wanted to be alone, to escape the judging eyes and the whispered comments he imagined were following him. As he walked, he dug his hands deeper into his pockets, the rough texture of the sketchbook a small comfort. He knew he couldn't keep running away, but for now, it was all he could do. He pictured his dad's reassuring grin, his strong hands, and for a brief moment, the knot in his stomach loosened. Maybe, just maybe, he could tell him what happened. Maybe his dad would know what to do. The thought was a small ember of hope in the gathering darkness. He quickened his pace, eager to get home. An unexpected visitor. The numbers on the whiteboard blurred into a taunting mess. 2x más 5 igual a 17. Pointless equations in a world rendered absurd by yesterday's spectacular faceplant. Mrs. Periwinkle's voice, normally a harmless drone, now bored into me like a dentist tool. She lectured on, blissfully ignorant of my inner turmoil. My eyes fixed on the desk's scarred surface, my finger tracing the ghostly etchings of some forgotten student. It felt like an eternity, not a mere day, since I had proudly proclaimed my dad to be Jason Statham. The resultant explosion of laughter still echoed in my ears. Even worse was Mrs. Periwinkle's gentle, yet firm, correction, dripping with that saccharine. "Billy, dear, let's be reasonable." That dear was the ultimate indignity. The classroom door groaned open, interrupting Mrs. Periwinkle's explanation of simultaneous equations. Every head swiveled. This wasn't a casual, tardy arrival. This was a measured, deliberate sound, as if the door itself was holding its breath. A long shadow bisected the meager light filtering in from the hallway. My pulse quickened. Who would dare disrupt math? Mr. Henderson, delivering a summons to his office? Or perhaps just Janet, eternally encumbered by a cast, seeking another pass. The figure moved into the room. He was immense, dwarfing the entrance. A charcoal gray suit, impeccably cut, seemed to swallow the light. His shoes gleamed, reflecting the dull linoleum in distorted miniature. A contained power radiated from him, silencing the adolescent chatter. His dark hair was cropped short and meticulously styled. A chiseled jaw and prominent cheekbones defined his face. A thin white scar cut a path across his left brow. His gaze swept the room, keen and intense, like a raptor searching for movement. My breath caught in my throat. That gaze, that jawline. Mrs. Periwinkle, momentarily speechless, stammered, "May I help you?" Her usually confident tone was reduced to a reedy squeak. She clutched her marker as if it were a life raft. He didn't immediately respond. He continued his slow, deliberate scan, his eyes pausing for a fraction of a second on each face. The silence grew, a palpable weight in the room, broken only by the frantic rhythm of my own heartbeat. He carried himself with a fluid grace that belied his size. Finally, his gaze locked onto mine. A slow smile transformed his features. The scar by his eye deepened, lending him an unexpected, roguish charm. He held my gaze, an unspoken acknowledgment passing between us. "I believe," he said, his voice a low, resonant rumble that vibrated through the room, "I'm looking for a young man named Billy Butterfield." Mrs. Periwinkle's eyes widened in disbelief. She looked from me to the stranger, then back again, a slow dawn of realization spreading across her face. "Billy," she whispered, barely audible. Is this?" Her voice trailed off, unable to articulate the improbable truth. He moved further into the room, his eyes never leaving mine. The air crackled with anticipation. He nodded, his smile broadening. "That's right. I'm here for my son." He paused for effect, letting the words hang in the air. Then, turning towards Mrs. Periwinkle, his expression softened. "Hello, I'm Jason Statham. Jason arrives." The doorbell chimed, a crystalline melody that shattered the oppressive quiet of Mrs. Periwinkle's domain. Billy, mesmerized by the worn arabesques of his desk, snapped to attention, a fragile hope flickering in his gaze. Mrs. Periwinkle, however, remained a granite monument to disapproval. The chime echoed, more insistent this time, demanding attention. At last, Mrs. Periwinkle moved, her composure betraying a hint of reluctance. She patted her eternally pristine skirt and marched to the portal, her heels a sharp, insistent percussion on the tiled floor. The door was wrenched open with unnecessary force. "Yes," she barked, her tone sharper than splintered ice. Framed in the doorway stood a man who bore zero resemblance to the action star. Tall, yes, with shoulders that stretched the seams of his weathered leather jacket. But his hair was a riot of dark curls, forever threatening to obscure his kind, smile-etched eyes. A permanent 5 o'clock shadow dusted his jaw, and a smile radiated a warmth that somehow penetrated Mrs. Periwinkle's Arctic front. He clutched a dented thermos and a slightly rumpled paper bag. "Afternoon," he rumbled, his voice a low vibration that filled the space. "I'm Jason, picking up Billy." Mrs. Periwinkle's mouth fell ajar. Her carefully constructed mask of superiority fractured, revealing a face grappling with disbelief and a creeping dread. She worked her mouth, a silent pantomime of shock. Jason shifted, his easy grin momentarily wavering. "Is this Mrs. Periwinkle's class?" Billy, rooted to his spot, heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird, finally found his voice. "Uncle Jason!" he exclaimed, scrambling from his seat. He didn't dare run, but his eyes, wide with relief and a touch of triumph, remained fixed on the figure in the doorway. Jason's smile bloomed again, brighter than before. He winked at Billy. "Hey, sport, ready to spring this place?" Turning back to Mrs. Periwinkle, his brow furrowed. "Everything all right, ma'am? You look like you've seen a ghost." A thin, reedy sound escaped Mrs. Periwinkle, barely audible. "But your eye," he claimed. She gestured vaguely at Billy, her hand trembling almost imperceptibly. Jason followed her gaze to his nephew, concern creasing his forehead. He knelt, setting the thermos and bag down, and placed a reassuring hand on Billy's shoulder. "What's up, kiddo?" he asked, his tones softening. He sensed the oppressive atmosphere, the lingering tension of some prior event. Billy gulped, his eyes flitting between his uncle and the still speechless teacher. She didn't believe me," he mumbled, his voice barely a breath. "About you." Jason's eyes narrowed. His easygoing nature evaporated, replaced by a protective aura that felt almost palpable. His gaze locked onto Mrs. Periwinkle, unwavering and intense. Didn't believe him? Didn't believe what exactly? Crimson flooded Mrs. Periwinkle's face. She stammered, struggling to regain control, to reassert her authority. He informed the class that his father was Jason Statham. Another frantic gesture, and I naturally assumed. A suppressed smile tugged at Jason's lips. He glanced at Billy, a silent inquiry in his eyes. Billy simply shrugged, a sheepish grin blossoming on his face. "Well," Jason said, turning back to Mrs. Periwinkle, his tone carefully measured, "I can understand how that might be a slight exaggeration." He paused, letting the silence thicken. "But I'm not his father. I'm his uncle, Jason Butterfield." He extended a hand, the gesture carrying a weight of silent challenge. "And I think," he added, a steely edge entering his voice, "we need a little conversation about the dangers of jumping to conclusions. A real-life action star." The air in the classroom thickened, a strange blend of disbelief and burgeoning excitement. Billy, still slumped in his chair, face burning, didn't dare look up. The silence screamed. Then, a voice, laced with a comforting rumble, cut through it. "Hey, sport," it said. "Heard you were showing off some of your artwork." Billy flinched, then slowly, cautiously, raised his head. Jason Butterfield, all 6'2" of him, stood there, a disarming grin crinkling the corners of his eyes. He wore a worn leather jacket, the kind that smelled faintly of engine oil and adventure, and a faded t-shirt stretched across broad shoulders. He looked exactly like the kind of guy who'd leap from a speeding motorcycle to disarm a bomb, only warmer, more approachable. "Uncle Jason," Billy squeaked, his voice cracking. Jason ruffled Billy's hair, the gesture surprisingly gentle. "That's me. Now, where are these masterpieces I've been hearing about?" He winked, a small, conspiratorial movement that made Billy's heart stutter with hope. He pointed a shaky finger at the pile of drawings Mrs. Periwinkle had so disdainfully tossed on his desk. Jason picked them up, his expression softening as he flipped through them. A low whistle escaped his lips. "Wow, Billy, these are incredible. The detail, the action, you really captured the explosion in that one. Looks just like that scene from Renegade Justice. Remember, the one with the helicopter?" Billy's face bloomed with a shy smile. He'd spent hours sketching that particular explosion, replaying the scene in his head, trying to get the light just right. "Yeah," he mumbled, but Mrs. Periwinkle said. "Mrs. Periwinkle," Jason said, his voice suddenly sharper, though he still kept his tone conversational, "obviously hasn't seen talent when it's staring her in the face." He glanced up, his gaze meeting Mrs. Periwinkle's, which was fixed on him with a mixture of mortification and stunned disbelief. Her mouth opened and closed soundlessly, like a fish gasping for air. The other kids were practically vibrating with excitement. Murmurs rippled through the room. "It's him. No way. He's even bigger in real life." Lily Rodriguez, who sat beside Billy, leaned over and whispered, "Your uncle is Jason Butterfield? That's so cool." Her eyes, previously filled with concern for Billy, now sparkled with awe. Before Billy could reply, a chorus of voices erupted. "Mr. Butterfield, can I have your autograph? Please, Mr. Butterfield, my mom loves your movies. That fight scene in Steel Fury was amazing." Jason chuckled, a deep, resonant sound. All right, one at a time, kids." But first, he turned back to Mrs. Periwinkle, his smile gone, replaced by a look that was polite but firm. "Mrs. Periwinkle, I think it's important to encourage kids' imaginations. Sometimes, what seems unbelievable is just unbelievable because we haven't opened our minds to the possibilities. Believing in a child's dreams, even the wildest ones, can make all the difference." He paused, letting his words sink in, then turned back to the eager faces surrounding him. "Now about those autographs." He spent the next several minutes signing notebooks, lunch bags, and even a crumpled piece of homework, each time making eye contact and offering a genuine word of encouragement. He treated each child as an individual, making them feel seen and valued. Billy watched, a profound sense of relief washing over him. He still felt embarrassed, but now it was overshadowed by a surge of pride and something else, something akin to belonging. He was Billy Butterfield, and his uncle was Jason Butterfield, and right now, in this chaotic, unbelievable moment, everything felt right. Mrs. Periwinkle, meanwhile, remained frozen, a statue of professional disapproval slowly crumbling under the weight of reality. The carefully constructed order of her classroom had been utterly, irrevocably shattered. She watched Jason, signing autographs with easy charm, and a chilling thought crept in her mind. She had made a terrible mistake. Apologies and new beginnings. A silence descended upon the classroom, so dense it felt like a tangible barrier. Mrs. Periwinkle stood ramrod straight, her grip on the desk's edge a desperate clutch. Billy Butterfield became absorbed in the grain of his scuffed shoes, each imperfection a sudden revelation. The collective anticipation of 26 third graders bore down on him like an unseen weight. Then, Mrs. Periwinkle's voice, a fragile thread, broke the quiet. "Billy," she uttered, and he winced, bracing for another scolding, a fresh wave of disbelief. "Billy, I owe you an apology." He dared to meet her gaze. Her face was an intricate map of conflicting emotions, chagrin, awkwardness, and a surprising hint of remorse. "Yesterday," she continued, her eyes skimming the room before settling on him once more, "I erred. I dismissed your words. I failed to trust you. And for that, I am genuinely sorry." The unexpected pronouncement lingered, a palpable presence in the air. The knot in Billy's stomach loosened slightly. He'd envisioned attention, a stern note destined for home. But a heartfelt apology? From the formidable Mrs. Periwinkle? It felt akin to a sunbeam piercing the perennial gloom above Oakhaven Elementary. He managed and mumbled, "It's all right, Mrs. Periwinkle." She shook her head, a gesture of resolute denial. "No, Billy, it's not all right. I subjected you to ridicule before your peers. That was inexcusable. I should have handled the matter with greater care." She inhaled deeply, visibly regaining her composure. "Henceforth, I vow to cultivate greater open-mindedness and empathy, and I promise to be a better listener." Lily Rodriguez, seated across the aisle, regarded Billy with wide, incredulous eyes. She had always perceived Mrs. Periwinkle as an unshakable figure, a bastion of rules and regulations. Witnessing her humility, hearing her contrite words, it was akin to observing a superhero exposed with a fault line. The recess bell clamored, shattering the fragile moment. Children bolted from their seats, eager to escape the lingering tension. But Billy remained rooted, a peculiar blend of relief and lingering self-consciousness churning within him. Mrs. Periwinkle cleared her throat. "Billy, might I have a word?" He hesitated briefly, then nodded. The other students streamed out, their animated chatter fading as they vanished into the corridor. Once alone, Mrs. Periwinkle adopted a softer tone. "Your father, he strikes me as a very accomplished individual." A faint smile grazed Billy's lips. "He is. I was particularly impressed by his vehicular mastery," she confessed, a delicate flush returning to her cheeks. "Perhaps he might be willing to address the class at some point? On the subject of stunt work safety, perhaps." Billy's eyes widened in disbelief. Really? He'd absolutely love that. The prospect of his dad, the genuine action star, standing before the class, discussing the mechanics of Hollywood spectacles, it seemed almost too fantastical to be true. The remainder of the week unfolded with unexpected ease. Mrs. Periwinkle seemed transformed. She fostered originality in their writing, even indulging Billy's outlandish narratives of his adventures with his father. She showcased his drawings of exploding vehicles and daring rescues on the classroom bulletin board. The ironclad structure of her lesson plans loosened, welcoming greater dialogue and student involvement. One afternoon, during art, she paused by Billy's desk, where he was diligently constructing a papier-mâché car. "That's quite remarkable, Billy," she remarked, her admiration genuine. You possess a true gift. Billy glanced up, startled. He wasn't accustomed to praise from Mrs. Periwinkle. Thanks, he mumbled, averting his gaze. You know, she pressed on, I've been reflecting on your comments about your father, about his unwavering encouragement for you to embrace your creativity and pursue your aspirations. Billy nodded, recalling his dad's incessant pep talks about self-belief, even in the face of daunting challenges. I've come to the realization that I've been neglecting that aspect with my students, Mrs. Periwinkle admitted. I've been so preoccupied with rules and procedures that I've failed to nurture their imaginations. She paused, a pensive expression clouding her features. I aspire to change that. I aspire to become a more effective educator. Billy smiled, apure, un guarded smile. Perhaps, just perhaps, this entire bizarre affair had ultimately yielded a positive outcome. Maybe, even errors could pave the way for fresh starts. Ice cream and believing. The double scoop of mint chocolate chip vanished quickly. Billy circled the last bit around the cone's edge, the icy sweetness a welcome respite from the day's earlier sting. Across from him, Uncle Jason, a smudge of marshmallow frosting adorning his chin, was already working on his second helping of Rocky Road. Enjoying that? Jason inquired, gesturing with a spoon. Billy nodded, a genuine smile finally gracing his features. Absolutely fantastic. He wasn't just talking about the frozen confection. The entire afternoon had undergone a transformation, the weight on his chest perceptibly lighter. All right, Jason said, settling back against the bench, one arm draped along its back. Tell me everything. Start from the beginning. After a moment's pause, Billy dove in. He recounted the disastrous show and tell, the titters of amusement, Mrs. Davison's skeptical gaze, even the hollow ache in his gut when he feared Jason wouldn't appear. The words spilled out, unpolished and heartfelt. Jason listened attentively, his face mirroring a range of emotions from gentle humor to deep concern. He offered no interruptions, no empty reassurances. He simply absorbed it all. When Billy had finished, a prolonged silence hung between them, punctuated only by the melodic calls of birds nestled in the oak branches overhead. Billy, Jason began, his tone gentle yet firm. There will always be skeptics. They'll question me. They'll question you. They question everything, especially anything that seems improbable. He nudged a loose stone with the tip of his shoe. The key is not letting their skepticism take root within you. Billy gave him a puzzled look. But Mrs. Davison, Jason countered softly, is only human. A person shaped by her own life and limitations. Her opinion doesn't define you or the tales you tell. What truly matters is your own conviction. Do you have faith in your narratives, Billy? Billy worried his lip, considering this. He yearned to believe. He needed that belief. Yet the memory of the classroom, the echoing laughter, the devastating disbelief refused to fade. I'm not sure anymore. Jason reached out and gave his shoulder a comforting squeeze. That's perfectly fine. It requires practice. It takes bravery. But it begins with you. You must be your own champion, your own most dedicated audience. He paused, a playful sparkle dancing in his eyes. You know, even I understand. I walk into a room and half the people probably think there's Jason Butterfield. Life comes easy to him. They don't witness the countless additions, the stinging rejections, the inner doubts I grapple with every single day. They only see the celebrity. But I would never have reached this point if I had allowed their assumptions to dictate my path. Billy mulled this over. He pictured the movie posters he'd seen, the interviews he'd watched. He'd always viewed Jason as just Uncle Jason, the fun, charismatic guy who always brought a smile to his face. He hadn't truly grasped the dedication, the hard work, the sheer tenacity it must have demanded to become Jason Butterfield. So, Jason said, rising and dusting off his trousers, how about we strike a bargain? You continue to craft your stories, and I'll continue to have unwavering faith in you, even when they involve dragons that exhale blueberry muffins. Billy chuckled, a sound lighter and more genuine than any he'd produced all day. Blueberry muffins? Jason winked. Who knows? It could be my next role. He draped an arm around Billy's shoulders. Come on, let's head home. I have a feeling someone has some serious world building to get started on. Later, as dusk painted the sky in vibrant shades of rose and violet, Billy sat at his desk, a clean notebook open before him. He gnawed on the end of his pen, a familiar spark igniting within him. He hesitated for a moment, then began to write. The spaceship, the Stardust Wanderer, was far from the pristine, gleaming vessels displayed in the hall of its. It was a patchwork creation built from scavenged parts, recovered from space hulks scattered across the Andromeda galaxy. He stopped, glancing anxiously toward the doorway. Then, remembering Jason's words, he inhaled deeply and continued, allowing the words to cascade onto the page, giving his imagination free rein. This time, the sting of doubt felt less intense. This time, he almost believed it himself.